Hello, algebra students. Mr. Lawrence here with your flipped lesson. And first, before we get to the lesson, I want to mention that I caught a small mistake on the Mastery Connect key, and I went and rescored some of your scores, and they weren't as bad as you initially thought. Almost everybody went up a point or so. There were some people that did go down a little bit. Now, again, if you're not getting like 3 or 4 of those right, you need to come in for help. There's too many of you just kind of blowing the class off, telling me it's hard for me, but you're not willing to do anything about it. I'm not going to bail you out. I'm going to let you fail. I don't know a better teacher than experience. And if you choose, and it is a choice, if you choose to not do any better, to not get any help, then I'm going to let you fail because I don't know how to shake that out of you. All right. That being said, we know one form of a linear equation. We know slope-intercept form, right? And slope-intercept form looks like this. Well, let me title it slope-intercept form. Right? And that's y equals mx plus b. And remember that this is our slope, and this is our y-intercept. Okay, well, we're going to learn 2 new forms today. And they're not necessarily going to tell us the slope and the y-intercept right off the bat, but they are going to tell us stuff. So we're going to learn point slope form. Now, before I do point slope form, remember the equation for figuring out slope is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1, right? Do you know what would happen if I multiplied both sides of the equation by the denominator? If I multiplied this guy by x sub 2 minus x sub 1 over 1, and of course if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other, x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Well, on the right-hand side, the denominators would cancel out, and I'd be left with y sub 2 minus y sub 1. On the other side, I could just write it m times the quantity of x sub 2 minus x sub 1, right? Where the x sub 2 and the y sub 2 are coordinates, and y sub 2 and y sub 1, did I say that right? X sub 2 and x sub 1 are x coordinates, y sub 2 and y sub 1 are y coordinates, and notice the 1's change sign. Well, point slope form looks almost exactly like that green one. We write y minus y sub 1. What's y sub 1? It's the inverse of the y coordinate. It's the inverse of the y coordinate. That's going to equal m. You should know what m is. M, of course, is the slope times the quantity of x minus x sub 1. And this, of course, x sub 1 here, this is the inverse of the x coordinate. So, if I give you an equation that looks like this, y minus 5 equals 1/2 times the quantity of x plus 2, without doing any work, you should know that the slope is 1/2. The point that this passes through, I need the inverse of positive 2. That would be negative 2. I need the inverse of negative 5. That's positive 5. All right, there you go. You know the slope and you know a point. Well, what can I do then? Well, of course, you can graph. So I can get out my little graph here. And I know that the line is going to go through the point negative 2, positive 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, right there. That is 1 point on the graph. And then from that point, I'm going to use my slope. I'm going to rise 1, run 2. Rise 1 from there, rise 1, run 2. Or I could go down 1 and back 2. And there you go. We have our line. That's called point slope form. Tell you what, let's get a little bit of practice with point slope form. Let's see if you can tell me. I'll give you a couple problems here and see if you can tell me what the point and what the slope are. Okay, there's 3 quick examples. See if you can follow me. I'm going to do the first one, and I know my slope is sitting right here. My slope is 4. If you want it as a fraction, you could write 4 over 1. The point is going to be the inverse of 1, negative 1, the inverse of 3, negative 3. How do I know which one to put where? Well, it's pretty simple, really. This is my x, and this is my y. See how simple that is? Okay, I take the inverse of the number that's added or subtracted to x, and that's my x coordinate. I take the inverse of the number that is added or subtracted to y, and that's my y coordinate. All right, you see if you can do the other two. Unpause the video when you're ready. Here come my solutions. My slope is 1/5, and the point is going to be 2, 4. On the last one, my slope is negative 4. The point is 11, negative 6. And there you go. And then if I asked you to graph these, you'd plot those points and then rise and run. Okay, that's what point slope form looks like. Now standard form is a little different. Standard form looks like this: ax plus by, and that's going to equal c. Okay, and there's one condition: a must be greater than or equal to 0 to be in standard form. In other words, a cannot be negative. Okay, actually I think a has just got to be greater than 0. I don't think a can be 0 for standard form. All right, so a has to be greater than 0. A cannot be a negative, cannot be 0. What are a, b, and c? They're just coefficients and constants. For example, 2x plus plus 4y equals 8. A is 2, b is 4, and c is 8. That's standard form. Now, graphing from standard form is a little trickier. I'm not going to show you that yet. We'll do that in another lesson. But I want you to be able to write equations in standard form. So let's take an equation like this. Let's go with 2y equals 3x plus 6. Now, some of you might say, hey, Mr. Lawrence, I want to divide by 2 because you'll turn it into slope-intercept form. And I'm glad you're thinking that. But actually, what we're going to do is we're going to try to write it in ax plus by equals c form, in other words, standard form. Now, what do you notice? On the left-hand side, the x term and the y term are together, aren't they? But in my black equation, the x term and the y term aren't together. Well, I could take away 3x from both sides. And watch what's going to happen. The 3x's will cancel, and I'll get negative 3x plus 2y, and that'll equal 6. This looks a lot like this one, doesn't it? There's the ax term, there's the by term, and there's the c term. The only problem is, remember that a must be greater than 0. And in this case, a is negative 3. To fix that, I'm going to multiply through by a negative 1. I'm going to multiply through by a negative 1, and I'm going to multiply through by a negative 1. So my new equation will be 3x minus 2y equals negative 6. And then I can identify a correctly as 3, b is negative 2, and c is negative 6. Let's give you a couple more here and see what you can do with them. Okay, there's 3 sample problems. See if you can get them all in ax plus by form equals c. Remember, the x term and y term are usually on the left-hand side together. The number that's called a constant, it doesn't have a variable, is on the right by itself, and the a is positive. So I look at this one here, and I notice that the y term's on the left-hand side, but the x term appears to be in the wrong place. So I'm going to take away 2x from both sides. Okay, negative 2x plus y, that equals negative 5. My a is not positive, so I'll multiply through by a negative 1. Multiply through by a negative 1. All right, so I'm going to get 2x minus y equals 5. And then I want you to correctly identify A, B, and C. Well, A is going to be 2, B is going to be negative 1, and C is positive 5. Very good. All right, 2 more to do. See if you can do them. Unpause when you're ready to see me. I'm going to subtract 2y from both sides. I'll get 6x minus 2y equals 7. A is going to equal 6. B is going to equal negative 2. And C is going to equal 7. All right, and this one, I don't like where the 1 is, so I'm going to subtract 1 from each side and get negative 4x equals 7y minus 1. And then I will subtract 7y and get negative 4x minus 7y equals negative 1. And then I'm going to multiply through by a negative 1 and multiply here by a negative 1. Well, I'm going to get 4x plus 7y, and that's going to equal 1. There you go. A, 4, B is 7, C is 1. All right, that's the lesson for today. I recommend you watch it again. Mr. Lawrence signing off. Good night, everybody.